June 13, 2025. The unthinkable happened. Over 200 Israeli warplanes pierced Iranian skies, unleashing devastation on nuclear sites, missile bases, and top military command centers. Tehran burned, generals and nuclear scientists wiped out, and Iran struck back. Missiles, drones, chaos in Israeli cities. The world holds its breath. But for those who've read the ancient scrolls, this may be more than war. In Ezekiel 38, the prophet spoke of Persia, modern-day Iran, rising with allies against Israel in a final divine confrontation. And now, it's happening. Alliances are forming. Blood has been spilled. The gates of prophecy may have opened. Is this the war Ezekiel saw? Has the countdown begun? Stay with us. Israel's strike. The breaking news. They called it Operation Rising Lion, and in the stillness before dawn, over 200 Israeli aircraft lifted into the skies, each one carrying not just weapons, but a message that the time for warnings had ended. From the nuclear facilities at Natanz and Fordo, to military outposts near Shiraz, Tabriz, and the outer edges of Tehran itself, the strikes were both sweeping and surgical. Above-ground enrichment sites were decimated. Covert drone operations, allegedly supplied by Mossad, delivered blows to deeply buried bunkers thought to be untouchable. But this was no symbolic display. Among the dead were men whose names carried weight across the Islamic world. Hossein Salami, the chief of Iran's feared Revolutionary Guard, General Mohammad Bagheri, and General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, head of Iran's aerospace forces. Two top nuclear scientists also perished, their identities still undisclosed. By morning, Iran had counted at least 78 of its own dead, and over 320 wounded, many of them elite personnel. Tehran, shaken to its core, answered quickly and violently. Over 150 ballistic missiles and more than 100 drones were launched toward Israel in waves, some breaching even the Iron Dome's formidable defense. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem bore the scars, over 30 civilians injured, many while at home, caught between history and fire. In response, Israel sealed its airspace and mobilized tens of thousands of troops. A nation perpetually prepared for conflict now stood at full alert. Meanwhile, the United States, while urging restraint, quietly repositioned missile defense systems and naval assets throughout the region. Publicly, Washington called on Iran to return to the negotiating table, framing it as a second chance. But behind the scenes, the world's superpowers were bracing for something far greater than a regional skirmish. Global markets trembled. Oil surged over 11% in hours. Airlines rerouted their planes, and stock exchanges from Tokyo to New York opened to sudden, sharp losses. Tremors from the deep. Earthquakes, crows, and a seal beneath the temple. As fire rained down from the heavens, the earth itself seemed to respond. In the heart of Jerusalem, during the sacred prayers of Passover, worshippers paused, not because of war, but because of an unmistakable tremor. Though minor in magnitude, the quake rippled beneath the Temple Mount, as if something long silent had been stirred. And then the crows came. Hundreds of black-winged birds circled the mount in eerie formation, their cries piercing the sacred silence. To many, it was an unsettling anomaly, but to others, especially the faithful gathered below, it was more than coincidence. They called it a warning, a harbinger echoing from the ancient past. What followed was even stranger. In a tunnel hidden beneath the Temple Mount, sealed off for centuries, archaeologists uncovered a royal seal unlike any previously catalogued. Etched into its surface were symbols almost too precise to ignore. A winged sun, flanked by lion-like beasts, images not only regal, but undeniably prophetic. Biblical scholars were quick to draw parallels to the visions of the prophet Ezekiel, who described creatures with wings and faces like lions surrounding the throne of God. Could this seal, this fragile artifact buried in stone, be more than a relic? Could it be a sign? And now the questions must be asked. Questions that challenge not just our politics, but our faith, our history, and the road we thought we understood. Persia, Gog, and the March of Prophecy. In the ancient scrolls of Ezekiel, the prophet recorded a vision so specific, it echoes like a drumbeat across time. Chapter 38 declares, Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Persia, the ancient name for what we now call Iran. And today, Iran doesn't stand alone. It is increasingly bound to Russia and Turkey, a triad of power with shared military goals, geopolitical tension with the West, and a growing hostility toward Israel. This isn't some vague diplomatic bond. It's active, coordinated, intentional. Iran supplies drones to Russia for use in Ukraine. Russia docks warships in Middle Eastern waters. Turkey stands as a gatekeeper between East and West, issuing sharp rebukes against Israel while walking a careful line, for now. But could these nations, this very alliance, be the same confederation spoken of in Ezekiel's vision? Many scholars believe that Magog, the name given to the great enemy in Ezekiel, refers to the lands north of Israel, regions encompassing modern Russia. Others see Gomer and Beth Togarmah, also listed, pointing to areas in Turkey. And so we are left to ask, is this recent strike by Israel merely a single military action? Or is it one move in a divine strategy, a plan drawn thousands of years ago on the canvas of prophecy? But prophecy is rarely fulfilled in isolation. As history accelerates, alliances shift like tectonic plates. And in the shadows of diplomacy, something ancient and deeply spiritual seems to be stirring. Rumors of war, prophetic alliances taking shape. Even as the world reels from the events of June 13th, the storm behind the headlines continues to build. Iran and Syria, long allies in ideology and arms, have now begun to formalize their defense pacts, binding themselves together more tightly than ever before. What was once informal cooperation has now taken on the shape of a pact, sealed with signatures, steel, and shared intention. At sea, Russian warships patrol the Mediterranean, their movements deliberate, symbolic, and watched carefully by NATO. In the skies over Europe, Iranian-built drones fill the Ukrainian airspace, expanding Tehran's influence far beyond the Middle East. Meanwhile, Turkey, publicly condemning Israel's airstrikes, has avoided direct involvement. But their silence masks a readiness. Their military remains poised, their rhetoric sharpening, and their allegiances uncertain. It feels eerily familiar, because it has been foretold. Ezekiel wrote not just of Persia and Magog, but of a coalition, a coming together of nations, ancient names with modern faces, who would one day rise against Israel. Not in scattered attacks, but in a united front. Are we watching that confederation form right now on live television through defense summits and battlefield proxies? And if the groundwork of Ezekiel is being laid before our eyes, then we must look further, beyond alliances and armies, to the signs that echo from Revelation itself, the symbols, the warnings, and the horsemen, who may already be riding. Revelation echoes. The horsemen ride again? The book of Revelation does not simply speak in visions, it speaks in symbols that reach beyond time, symbols meant not just to be read, but to be recognized when their shadows begin to fall across the world. And now, more than ever, Those shadows stretch long and heavy across our headlines. The red horse, the harbinger of war and bloodshed, has taken the stage with terrifying boldness. In the lands where prophets once walked, missiles now fall. From Gaza to Damascus, from Tehran to Tel Aviv, we watch as nations rise against nations, not in symbolic tension, but in open fire. And this, we are told, is only the beginning. Then comes the black horse, the rider of famine and collapse. Its arrival is not announced with thunder, but with silence. Empty markets, failed crops, broken supply chains. The United Nations warns that hunger is now surging across vast regions, especially in Africa and the Middle East. Prices soar beyond reach. Families are pushed to desperation. What once felt like crisis has become the new normal. And following behind, the pale horse, whose rider is death, and hell rides with him. Among the refugee camps of Syria, where the broken gather and the forgotten pray, a mysterious illness has emerged. It is spreading quickly, unidentified, unexplained, and uncontained. No origin, no name, only suffering. And yet, even as these global signs multiply, the ancient city of Jerusalem becomes a spiritual epicenter once again. There, division deepens with every failed peace accord and every bitter clash at the Temple Mount. The priestly garments of the temple, once considered lost to history, are now being carefully remade. And in a quiet field, a red heifer, long prophesied for purification rituals, has been born and is being raised under guarded watch. These are not isolated stories. They are not disconnected events or natural anomalies. They are part of a pattern, an unfolding narrative. And this pattern feels ancient. Recently, the skies over Turkey wept blood, or so it seemed. Residents reported crimson rainfall that baffled scientists and awakened a long-dormant fear in the hearts of many. In Europe, a strange sound pierced the skies. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't aircraft. It was deep, metallic, like a trumpet reverberating across the clouds, heard in multiple cities, but traced to no earthly source. And in Africa, as economies crumble and conflicts rage, famine spreads with a quiet vengeance, leaving millions unseen, unheard, and starved of hope. Are these merely environmental anomalies? Or are they, as some have begun to ask, divine signals, intended not to punish, but to awaken? Because when taken together, these signs form a constellation of prophecy, one that overlaps, converges, and presses itself against the very pages of Revelation. The red horse rides, and the world bleeds. The black horse follows, and the earth hungers. The pale horse rises, and death lingers. Jerusalem divides. Priestly rituals return. The red heifer is born, and strange omens fall from the skies. This is no longer about scattered curiosities. It is about convergence, a pattern that reflects something far more structured, far more intentional, and far more biblical than most are ready to admit. The Temple Mount, where the riders turn. If the horsemen of Revelation symbolize chaos unleashed across the earth, war, famine, death, then their spiritual center may be here, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Because prophecy has never ridden on politics alone. It rides through places, sacred places, where heaven and earth have long wrestled for dominion. In recent days, tensions around the Temple Mount have intensified once more. Jewish activists reportedly moved altar materials closer to the sacred site, stirring a storm of religious and political backlash. For some, it's a prophetic act of preparation. For others, a dangerous provocation. But beneath the headlines, something deeper is unfolding. The Temple Mount, more than any other place on earth, sits at the fault line of prophecy. It is the axis of covenant and conquest, where the red horse of war clashes with the unseen forces of restoration, and where the spiritual realm presses through into our physical one. Because controlling this place isn't just about ancient stones or religious ceremony. It's about controlling the narrative of the end times. It's about who gets to fulfill the next chapter in a script written thousands of years ago. And if this battleground marks the surface, what lies just beyond sight, beyond sound, may be even more consequential. A spiritual gate, now opened. The opened gate, the veil tears. In Revelation, the breaking of seals is not just the release of destruction. It's the unveiling of hidden things. And when the fifth trumpet sounds, we read of a gate, a cosmic door, being unlocked. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And there arose smoke from the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. Revelation 9:1-2. It is not only nations that are stirred, it is the spiritual realm, the realm of principalities, of ancient forces bound long ago, but now permitted to roam. And in times like these, when war shakes cities and sacred sites stir with activity, it's no stretch to ask, has something been released? Could the recent global strike, the rise in ritual preparation on the Temple Mount, and the convergence of signs be more than political chaos? Could they be a tearing of the veil, the beginning of Revelation's great unveiling? Luke 8:17 whispers a parallel truth. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be made known. Perhaps what we are seeing now is not just man moving against man, but heaven allowing the unseen to step into view. And through that open threshold, prophecy does not end, it continues. Because what rises through the smoke may not be a rider, but a throne. Babylon Rising. The shadow of the fourth rider. In Revelation, Babylon is more than a city. It is a system, a spirit, a counterfeit kingdom set to rise in opposition to God's throne. It is the false crown, the seductive power, the final stage before judgment falls. And now, as the smoke clears from modern war zones, we begin to hear it. The whisper of Babylon again. Across Iraq and Syria, extremists speak of rebuilding an empire, calling for a return to the caliphate. But this isn't just about territory. It is about fulfilling a counter-prophecy, a kingdom built not on truth, but on imitation and deception. As economies fracture and hearts grow weary of endless wars, the world is slowly preparing itself, not for peace, but for a peace bringer. A leader who offers answers, stability, unity. But underneath his promises lies the pale rider's shadow. The Bible foretells one who will emerge in such a time, charismatic, persuasive, powerful, the Antichrist, riding not as a warrior, but as a counterfeit Messiah. Babylon is not just rising from dust. It is rising from desire, the world's longing for order, even at the cost of truth. And as its throne is set, we may be witnessing the foundation of the final deception, built not in mystery, but in full view. Is this just another chapter in the endless book of human conflict? Or have we crossed into something far more ancient, something sacred, foretold, and irreversible? Because what we are seeing is not chaos without meaning, but a sequence, a divine choreography that matches the pulse of prophecy. These signs do not float in isolation. They are aligned like stars across Scripture, forming constellations that point to a single truth. Jesus warned us of days like these. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for these are the beginnings of sorrows. Matthew 24:6-8.